Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, CEO of SBAM.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Miller. I want to say a big welcome to one of our new members, Balance Life Counseling. They're located in Linden. So welcome to the owner, Kimberly Gruder, and her team. And of course, we are welcoming them on behalf of our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. You can learn more about Consumers Credit Union at consumerscu.org. So Brian, it is budget week here in Lansing at the Capitol. And generally speaking, how is that going?
Well, this is, there were a lot of budgets that were, the departmental budgets were passed out of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees last week. And they do still appear to be very intent on passage or final passage of the state's budgets by the very beginning of June, or maybe even the end of May, which is a pretty tall order. There is another milestone that has to hit before they can do the budgets, and that is a revenue estimating conference. Our Constitution requires that budgets be balanced, and so they can't pass a balanced budget until there is a consensus on how much revenue the state is likely to have next year, and they have to stay within those boundaries. So they passed out of the appropriations committees and have been sent to the House and Senate floors. And it is believed that they will pass they call first House budgets. So in other words, the Senate will pass their version, the House will pass their version. The governor, of course, back in February had introduced her version. So this step is like that, where everybody puts all their cards on the table, and then there's a negotiation that starts. So there'll be kind of a holding pattern between this week when those budgets pass and when the revenue estimating conference locks in the assumptions for next year's revenue that the budget has to be balanced against, and then it's not exactly clear if they intend on doing what are called conference committees, a place where they put the budgets, they assign a special committee to work out the differences between the House and the Senate versions, or if they plan on negotiating either informally or just as part of the regular process. So what they intend to use in terms of the process that they intend to use is not totally clear. But given the time frame that they're talking about, makes me think probably conference committee, because what they can do, been hearing that they might roll the budgets up into, you'll have like a school budget, and then like an omnibus budget, everything else. So you have two really big budgets that pass, and if they go through what's called a conference committee, which has members of the House and the Senate on it, kind of joint committee, then it gets an up or down vote with no amendments in the House and the Senate. And this being the new legislature's first budgets, an up or down vote without amendments might sound attractive to them. So that's kind of what I expect, especially if they're trying to move the budgets faster this year. There's a policy conference on Mackinac Island that the Detroit Regional Chamber puts on every year. And it seems to be the goal to have the budget wrapped up by then. And it starts at the very end of May, and I think runs through June 1st. So if they wanted it done by then well, time is short. And that's what makes me think that the conference committees are probably the way they'll go.
Are we expecting any surprises, or have there been any surprises so far?
I would say the biggest surprise is how far the House and the Senate are away from each other, and how many changes that they made from the governor's presentation. So the governor's proposal which was made in the winter as a starting point, and since the House and the Senate are of the same party, I think there was some thought that maybe the budgets that passed would be very similar, but really they're quite different. So that was a little bit of a surprise. One of the things that we've talked a lot about, you've heard a lot about it in the news, is this idea of economic development incentives. So this SOAR fund, which is the fund where the majority of the economic development incentives are paid out of, things like that Ford deal in Marshall, or the one that's had kind of a lot of controversy, Goshen up in Big Rapids, and several others that are projects out of the SOAR fund. The governor had asked for $500,000, and the legislature, the House passed budget. It's in the Labor and Economic Opportunity budget, zeroed it out and replaced it with a few dozen new program proposals that are not those types of attraction incentives. That was, given how high profile these deals in the economic development and how much they went to bat for them earlier on in this term, I was a little surprised that the House zeroed out that line item. There was some talk that there was growing frustration, if you will, about how much attention was being paid to economic development projects for larger corporations, and it seems to be playing out in this budget in a way that zeroes them out. Another loose end, though, is that you remember when we had all that confrontation earlier in the year on the income tax bill. Well, that income tax bill, we were trying to make sure that a decrease for small business was preserved. In it, though, was an earmark created for large company incentive projects of $600 million a year for the next 6 years, or for the next 3 years. So it's interesting to me that a bill was passed that created an earmark, but the budget itself zeroed out the line item. So I'd say that was probably the biggest surprise to me in the budget, aside from the fact that it's just there were quite a few differences. There's some funding formula differences for university funding. Seems to be the workforce development programs that we support seem to have a fair amount of support across the Capitol, the House, and the Senate. And then on the education front, I think there's still a lot to be worked out there. Policy and appropriations with education have often been kind of intertwined or mixed together, and there have been a lot of changes that have been made, but then also are being proposed. Last week we saw a repeal of the grading system for schools. So there was a grading system that gave schools essentially a grade just like students get. And so that was repealed and on its way to the governor. And then there was a different school accountability measure that didn't allow kids who couldn't read at grade level to be automatically promoted to the next level, the next grade. And it's called the third grade retention bill. So the fact that there's a lot of things in play right now with education, that's I think there'll be some interesting policy and budget debates that happen over the coming months with respect to education. It's one thing to repeal those accountability measures. There's also additional resources that are being deployed or proposed for schools. I think they're going to have to replace what they're repealing in terms of accountability measures with something else. If new resources are being deployed, given how much schools have really, or kids in schools are struggling. Michigan has continued to fall behind the rest of the nation when it comes to educational performance. So I think there'll be a lot more yet to come on education. So they're moving fast, and we'll probably take a couple of big steps this week in getting the budget passed, and we'll see if they can live up to their goal, which is to pass it by the very beginning of June.
All right, and we'll certainly keep our viewers updated as we know more. So the Transportation Asset Management Council released an update on road conditions, and what did we learn?
I'm going to share a couple graphs that I pulled from their report. And what I wanted to do was give a just a, I guess it's I would say a progress report of where things stand with our roads and bridges, and it makes sense also maybe to give you a little bit of a tutorial, if you will. That we've got federal aid roads that largely are paid for and built according to federal standards. Things like I roads and M roads. So think of like major trunk line roads. Those are federal aid roads. Federal aid roads have been given more more attention lately. You might recall back in 2019 there was a decision made to borrow about $3.5 billion. And the way that borrowing happened, that money can only be used on the federal roads. So this study is only updated every other year. And this council is the government's council. So these are the government's numbers, not like an outside interest group. But as you can see, from 2020 to 2022, when there was a pretty major deployment and quite a bit of time when traffic was way down on Michigan roads, there is you can see that the percent of roads that were poor went down, and mainly they went into the fair category. But as you look at the projections now based on current situations or status quo, even though there are a lot more dollars for roads these days, the cost per mile of road is a lot higher. So those dollars aren't necessarily going to get us much in terms of overall improvement. In fact, if you look, say out 8 to 10 years, you'll see that pretty much projected to be back to that 2020 level. So in terms of the federal roads, the federal aid roads, you can see that 25% are currently in the good category as of 2022, and 33% are in the poor category. Now, looking at the non-federal roads, the non-federal aid roads, so these would be your county roads, your city roads, your township roads. Not surprising that that a lot higher percentage of them are rated in the poor category, and so that is. And I want to point out the bar graph is still the federal aid roads, but the wheel graph on the right-hand side of the screen, that just shows, that separates out just the local roads, and local roads are definitely in worse condition compared to the trunk line roads. So but again, remember, those borrowed dollars from 2019 can only be used because they use the Transportation Commission to authorize the bonds. Those bonds can only be used for federal roads. That commission has authority to do it without the legislature, borrow money without the legislature, if it's spent on federal roads. And then looking at bridges, same sort of thing, where you can see the MDOT bridges and then local bridges. So it's a little different. It's not described as federal aid bridges, but the bridges that the state is responsible for, you'll see the vast majority are in the fair category, and 23.8 in considered in good condition. And then the state has, by the way, made a major effort going back about 10 years on bridge replacement. So the state's bridges, pretty good amount of them in fair condition. But you'll notice that the forecast still shows the number that are the number in good that will go down, and then in the local road agency, you'll see actually looking a little better. So local bridges, but I do want to point out that local bridges are not as expensive as state bridges, and so it's not unusual on the bridge and the bridge situation. Plus, I don't know that they're actually rated as often as the states, the bridges that the state is more responsible for. So that's what we're looking at in terms of overall road conditions, and that full report is now available. There's actually a nice article from Bridge that no, actually, I'm sorry, it was MLive that covered the report, and it's free. Anybody can take a look at it. But I know it's been kind of frustrating for a while for policymakers that at a time when the state had the full implementation of a road funding package in 2015, which got fully implemented by 2019, so it phased in over those years. So you had the full new package, and then a bunch of borrowed money on top of that, and a little bit of initial improvement, and then right back on the road to deteriorating roads. And I think one of the frustrating aspects is like right when those resources became available, and there was some federal dollars too. The federal funding for roads had some temporary bump as well. Costs rose like crazy, and so the dollars, if you were to take the dollars that the state has today and apply them to what it cost to build roads back when the 2015 roads package passed, well, we'd be in pretty good shape. But the cost per mile has continued to rise very substantially, and so the resources just don't buy what they used to.
All right, and with that, it is time for our Data Monday report.
All right, so we'll do Data Monday here, and what I want to do is to share what I would consider to be mainly it's complicated. I'm going to say from a standpoint of fighting inflation, I would say there's actually a few encouraging signs here, but that's not to say economically speaking they're encouraging, because getting inflation under control, it's a double-edged sword because it means that things are slowing down. So first is job openings and layoffs. These would be permanent layoffs. And you'll see that job openings are declining. Again, not low historically speaking, but that kind of general trend toward decline is continuing. And then the number of layoffs has increased somewhat. So those two things working in tandem are just show this continuing story of a slowdown. Again, not cratering, not doesn't at this point has it reached a alarm bell status, but definitely a lot of signs of slowing. Next is the initial job list claims, and this initial compared to continuing jobless claims, they're both at about the same level. So this would be the number of people that are filing for unemployment for the first time, and the number of people who were already on unemployment last week and they're re-upping this week. So both of those kind of they both rose over the last 2 quarters, and they've stayed about they're both kind of running on track with each other. Now temporary layoffs. So you got the previous, we looked at permanent layoffs. Now we're looking at temporary. Those are actually down, and I'm not terribly surprised by that. I don't think that that people are doing the you let an employee go in this day and age, you're ever going to get them back. And so if you intend to bring people back, it appears to me like more and more companies are just finding a way to keep them on. So temporary layoffs going in the opposite direction. And permanent layoffs. Now looking at job openings, I want to zero in on a few industries. So durable goods, which is in blue, you see that trending downward. Job openings in non-durable goods, that in orange, trending looks just like durable goods. And then in the leisure industry, which is in white, still high, but coming back down. So in each of these cases, it wasn't that long ago when we were seeing, back in 21 and definitely in the beginning of 22, you saw things like the leisure industry and durable goods going opposite directions. And so in this case, they've kind of all are showing that the signs of cooling. And then in the professional and business services, this one, you can see that actually kind of rolling over and coming back down on the top if you look at the absolute. But if you compare it year over year, I think it's pretty clear that growth in this area is about 2.5% lower than it was last year. Again, not negative, just 2.5% lower than it was last year. And then overall, U.S. employees, so this would be non-farm payrolls, as the economists put it, leveling off. And so if you look at the in the orange in the bottom, and you look at the period over period comparisons, year over year comparisons, you see that the rate of growth is slowing compared to before. So again, not cratering, not falling, slowing, which is not a in this sort of thing, you hate to see things slow, but when you have concerns with inflation, not bad to see slowing, not cratering. Labor force participation rate among women in the what's called the economists call the prime working ages, which is 25 to 34. We did see this age category for men recover previously. In fact, it was actually a little higher than pre-pandemic levels. Nationwide, a little higher than pre-pandemic levels, not here in Michigan. But but among women, it actually had a little harder time recovering, but actually did hit the pre-levels. So this is it's a pretty good sign. It's difficult. It takes another year before data is released to see state by state, by age category or by gender. But the fact that the nation has kind of caught up to previous highs for women in the workforce, ages 25 to 54, which is the majority. That's that the girth of the workforce is in that age bracket. Good sign. And then Federal Reserve, they do report consumer credit outstanding. This is primarily driven by credit cards. And you'll see the dotted orange line is where we stand today. That is, you can see there was only 1 point going all the way back. This graph goes back to 2007. There's only 1 month that was higher than it is today, going back to 2007. So in other words, consumer debt, again, driven by credit cards, really did shot up last month. And the cost of credit is a lot higher too. So you'll notice it was quite a bit lower last month. I suppose that tax returns may have played a part in that. And then, of course, in the pandemic, when the government, when people couldn't go anywhere and couldn't spend much money, and the government was giving out a lot of money, you'll see consumer credit went negative. In other words, people were paying off debt during that time period. But if you look month by month overall, consumer debt is back with a vengeance as compared to the pre-pandemic times, including during good economic times. And then also wanted to show, this is just an index where bankers for large and medium-sized firms and for small. So large and medium is in blue, small is in orange. They're moving in tandem. This is showing demand for commercial and industry loans, for business loans. And that demand has precipitously dropped. And so again, another item that would point toward a slowdown, that businesses are taking on less debt, which would suggest that they're being a little more conservative, not expanding as much when it comes to their debt incidents or their willingness to take out loans. So everything about that whole report looks to me like when we talked a few months ago about is the rising interest rates, is it working? Is it going to tamp down inflation? I mean, it just looks like it's the whole process is slow and it's taken longer than people maybe thought, but it all points that way, that stuff is just slowing down. We've heard anecdotally, by the way, from members in the last couple of weeks or the last month or so. We're hearing this anecdotally too. People are feeling a slowdown. And it's not unusual for that to be felt by smaller businesses earlier. But this is one of those cases where probably a pretty good indication that the interest rate increases are working in terms of slowing things down and hopefully stopping inflation. Now, I think the attention will more and more turn toward preventing a recession, and that's quite a needle to thread.
All right, well, that is pretty much everything we have for you today, except an invitation to join us Wednesday in Fenton. We'll be at Fenton Winery and Brewery for our business owner networking event. We call these owner-to-owner events. So if you're in the Fenton area and you're available between 4 and 6 p.m. on Wednesday, please join us. You can learn more on our website at sbam.org/events. Have a great week, and we'll see you back here on Thursday.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.